What's a good word, y'all? DKB here. So we know that Aaron Rodgers should become our starting quarterback at some point officially for the 2023 season. It made me start thinking about the weapons that we've been able to assemble for him to try to lead us to the promised land in what I consider a Super Bowl or bust season. And so, the wide receiver room is definitely a strength, but it's only an injury or a trade away, in my opinion, from technically becoming a bit of a liability, right? You look at Garrett Wilson, a clear number one. You look at Allen Lazard now, definitely a strong option if he's utilized in more of a second, third, fourth receiving role. And then you take a look at maybe a guy like Corey Davis, who we keep strong, statistically should be able to put up great numbers, especially with Aaron Rodgers throwing to him, but durability concerns. And then you start turning to Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims, who Elijah Moore has had flashes of, potentially being a borderline number one wide receiver, but definitely a very, very strong, above average, maybe elite, depending on who you talk to, number two option in the NFL. Denzel Mims hasn't shown us much, but I wanted to lock in on Elijah Moore because he's one of the two players, Denzel Mims being the other, that requested a trade last season. A lot of that was due to him not being a functional part of the offense, basically being invisible, and when he was targeted, it wasn't great situational awareness by a lot of the quarterbacks, a lot of force feeding. He really only ended up having somewhat of a connection with Mike White last year, and he's no longer on the roster either, jetting down to Miami. So what do we do with Elijah Moore? We haven't received any updates about his willingness to still remain on the team, but the question still does beg, do you move on from the guy that in a selfish display ended up becoming the focal point of what was a huge blowout win against said Packers last season? Or do you keep him knowing that the talent is obviously there in quarterback play, should put him near the top of, a lot of fantasy leagues, for example, definitely put him in the conversation for one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and whether that comes in a slot role or some kind of versatile mix of him being on the boundary and the inside, doesn't necessarily matter. Now, I still kind of fall somewhere in the middle of this argument. I think it is a potential that he could still be a locker room problem, right? It takes a lot for a guy to, have the balls essentially to go out there and make the situation about him, especially when a lot of people are riding high. I remember blowout predictions all over the place when we went to the Packers, and for us to do that to them instead, and, at the end of the game, just once again, I believe that was another one of the games where he was only targeted once, and I believe there's a penalty that ended up happening on the play, so that was tough. On the other hand, though, everything that I've seen from highlights to tape, all 22, to even the statistics, when you just want to eyeball look at them, you can tell that you have something here in this guy. So I don't want to give up on that, but I also don't want to reward the bad behavior and send a message to the locker room saying that certain players can be above, the expectations that we're setting here. So I say all that because I did come across a recent article. If we think back to when the trade request occurred, there's a couple of teams interested, the Cleveland Browns being one of them, and they could potentially still be interested once again. I mean, I remember looking at that offense, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt obviously brought the speed, but in the wide receiver room, you didn't really have a guy like that. Amari Cooper is definitely a number one wide receiver in the NFL. He's been crushing it for a long time. Donovan Peoples-Jones is your chain mover, but they didn't really have a guy that can go out there and, take it the distance. And Elijah Moore would bring that element to that room, that organization, and that could really end up rounding things out. On top of that, you imagine Deshaun Watson hopefully getting back into that Houston Texans form for the Cleveland Browns, and you have the makings of a dangerous offense before you even start imagining what Elijah Moore can look like in there. And for the record, Elijah Moore is one of the few wide receivers I've personally seen where it's almost too easy for him to create separation and give you a window to throw into. So it would be fascinating to see him with a team that, even if they don't make him the focal point of an offense, take the Cleveland Browns, for instance, there's a lot of weapons there. Also a very run-oriented team. you still are looking at a guy where in a lot of situations you can make him the number one target just because of the space he's going to create and different matchups, etc. Especially with his success winning on the outside and inside. So it would be interesting to see if the Cleveland Browns would try to pursue them again and what we would initially get. I mean, even as recently as the Aaron Rodgers trade, we've been floating out the idea of maybe we send Elijah Moore as part of the package to acquire Aaron Rodgers, release some draft capital from us. But I think where I've officially settled is I want to make sure we are as 100% as we can be as an offense. I want all the weapons that we can get. Let's run it. Try to get our Super Bowl that's eluded us for so long. And, if things don't work out after that first initial year, then you can start trying to shift some pieces around and play with things. But I really do think you strut out an offense that has Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Allen Lazard. We'll have to see what the bottom half of our wide receiver room looks like with Berrios leaving, Jeff Smith leaving. I think maybe Calvin Jackson is still there from like a practice squad standpoint. But right now, the glass is kind of half empty, taking a look at the wide receiver room. So, Denzel Mims, hopefully he gets unlocked somehow in this offense. But I think you go into it saying let's stack the cupboards as full as we can, and we'll let things play out organically as the season goes on. If things aren't still clicking by the time the trade deadline in week 8 comes around, then we can revisit the conversation. Unless we get blown away again with some kind of package, we can't deny multiple day 2 picks, something of that nature. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Cleveland Browns potentially interested in Elijah Moore. Beyond that, though, would you trade Elijah Moore or would you keep him on the roster in order to try to maximize our Super Bowl potential? Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you again. Peace.